Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today on Masech the Sotah daf Dalid. We are going to begin on the very bottom of Gimel Amid Beis, the second and last line. Tanrabanan. Ezuhi edus harishayna, zu edus stira. So, what is the first element of testimony? This is the edus that they were secluded. Edus achrona, the later. Zu edus tuma. This is referring to the edus that someone actually witnessed her with this man. As we continue to Daled and Aleph. So v'kama shir stira. How long is shir stira? So it's kedei tuma, kedei bia, kedei hara. So it's an interesting language over here, which Taisa says, B'Yerushalmi kol ilin shi'ulin achar hasaras Hataras Sinor. So basically what we're saying is that there is this link between these three things. Kedei Tuma is the amount of time it takes a person to have Bia, and also it's Kedei Hora. It doesn't mean Sof Bia, but even Tchilas Bia. That in itself is enough to say that this person potentially has violated the element of stira. You have to be secluded at least the amount of time of being able to have had bia through hara. Says Rashi, Mahu kedei tuma, kedei bia, Mahu kedei bia, kedei hara. So that's how you read it. Dahainu nishikas aver ba'oso makom. When we're dealing with hara, it is just literally a man's aver touching oso makom. But kamishir, so then the Gemara is going to now discuss how long is that? How long is that amount of time? So on this, the Gemara says like this: it's kedei hakafas dekel, David Rabbi Shmuel. He says the amount of time basically for a person to be able to go around a palm tree. Rabbi Lezer omer kedei mezigas hakais. The amount of time it takes to prepare a cup. As Rashi says, l'moiz go b'mayim ustam kais revius. So basically, you have to have a mixture between water and the very strong wine. Rabbi Yeshua Omer Kedei L'shtaisai. The amount of time it takes to actually drink that drink. Ben Azai Omer Kedei Litzleis Beitza. The amount of time it takes to roast an egg. Rabbi Kiva Omer Kedei L'goima. It's the amount of time it takes to swallow an egg. Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira Omer Kedei L'gmor Sholosh Beitzim. The amount of time it takes to swallow 3 eggs, zu achar zu, one after the other. Okay. Rabbi Lezer ben Yirmiyah Omer Kedei Likshar Gardi Nima. The amount of time it takes for a weaver to basically tie a thread. And again, he's a professional. These things take a matter of just a couple of seconds. Chanan bar ben Pinchas Omer Kedei Shetoishit Yada L'taich Piha Lital Kesam. The amount of time it takes for her to put her hand into her mouth to remove some type of straw or some piece of wood or something which is stuck, as Rashi says, bein shinel, between her teeth. The amount of time it takes for her to put her hand into a basket, little kicker, to take bread. Now, why bread? Now, even though there's no proof that this is the amount of time of hara, but nonetheless, there is a hint to it. As the pasuk says in Mishlei, Kiva ad isha zayna ad kikar lachem. So it speaks about an isha zayna and equates her to a kikar lechem. So we see that this bread is connected. So the amount of time it takes to have hara is the amount of time just to pick up a piece of bread, basically. The whole hani lovely. Srichi. The question is, why do we need to have all these different mentionings? Says Rashi, Lumisni Bereisha, Lisni Shir Stira, Kedei Tuma, Kedei Hakafas Dekel. Why does it say this? The Itan, Kedei Tuma. If we only said the amount of time of stira is Kedei Tuma, Havimina Kedei Tumasa, the Artsusa. The amount of time it takes not just to actually have the tashmish, but also the seduction, which also is time-consuming as well before. Kamashwan Kedei Bia. It's just the bia itself. It's not anything that leads up to the bia. It's the actual act. V'itana Kedei Bia, Havimina Kedei Gamar Bia. Maybe you would think it's the completion of the act. Kamashwan Kedei Hara, which is the tchila. So even the beginning. The Yashmin and Kedei Harav only mentions Tchilas Bia, having Kedei Harav or Tzusa. Again, maybe you would also include the seduction. Kamashman Kedei Tuma, Vikama Kedei Hara, Kedei Hakafas Dekel. Again, the amount of time it takes to go around a palm tree. Minhi, in fact, the Gemara, it says in the Tosefta, quoting the Pasuk in Bamidbar, Venistera, and she was secluded. So Vikama Shir Steer, how long is this? Lo Shamanu, so the Pasuk doesn't say. Kishoimer V'hinitma, the fact that it says the word afterwards, V'hinitma, Haba Oimer Kedei Tuma, Kedei Bia Kedei Hara, which is what? So it's Kedei Chazaris Dekel de Rabbi Lezer. So we see that it's the amount of time to basically go back from a dekel. So according to the sheet that we said before, it's Kedei Hakafas Dekel, but according to Rabbi Lezer, he says it's Chazaris Dekel. So that's going to be a question. Rabbi Shua Omer Kedei Mezikas Hakais, Ben Azai Omer Kedei Lishtaisa, to drink it. Rabbi Kiva Omer Kedei Lusalais Beitza, to roast an egg. Rabbi Huda Ben Besera Omer Kedei Lugaima, to swallow it. So Kasakadaita Chanar Havamina, our original thought process that we were thinking, Hainu Hakafas Dekel, Hainu Chazaris Dekel. Maybe they're the same thing, going around a circle or going around a day palm tree or returning from it. So Hasam Rabbi Yishmael Kedei Hakafas Dekel, over there, Rabbi Yishmael, who's again at the very top of the Gemara in line 3, he's the one who says Hakafas Dekel, going around the tree. And Rabbi Lezer disagrees. So Rabbi Lezer Kedei Chazaris Dekel. So the fact that you have these two different opinions must be that they're not the same shear. So Rabbi, Hakafa Beregel Chazar Barach. Hakafa is going around with your feet, and Chazar is referring to coming back, means the wind. In other words, the wind blows the branches, then it comes back. So Boy Ravashi, Chazar Barach, when we say that the wind brings back the branches, and that's the amount of time of Hara, Ki Hechid Azav Hadar. Also does mean the amount of time it goes and comes back. O Dilma ki heichad azavi asi bahader koi beduchte. Maybe it stops shaking from the wind. Teku. So we're not exactly sure the exact time parameter. Hasam Rabbi Lezer Kedei Mezikas Hakais, the amount it takes to dilute a cup. Hachidei Chazaris Dekel. So which one is it? So Yidividichad Shirhu. They're really the same time. So Hasam Rabbi Yeshua Kedei Lishtos to drink. Hachaimer Kedei Mezikas Hakais. And over here he says the amount to dilute the cup. The Ema Kedei Limzeg V'Lishtos. Actually, he requires both, to dilute the cup and to drink. Blame Yidividichad Shirhu, one which is at the same time. So Im Kain Hainu Rabbi Lezer. If it's the same thing, then he's saying the same thing as Rabbi Lezer. So Hasam Rabbi Omer Ben Azai Kedei Listos Beitza. So Ben Azai, who's never married, we're going to ask us in a second. Nonetheless, he gets himself involved in this machlokas. The amount of time it takes to roast an egg. Hachamer Kedei Lishtaisa, the amount of time to drink. Yidividichad Shir, who's the same measurement. Hasam Rabbi Kiva Kedei Lim Gaima, to swallow an egg. Hachamer Kedei Listos Beitza, to roast an egg. Emer Kedei Listos Beitza Lo Gaima. So maybe it means roasting an egg and swallowing it. So let me leave the chad shir. Why don't we just say it's the same measure? You can't hanu ben azai. Then it will be the same shir. Hasam Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira Kedilim Gimel Shalosh Beitzim. Not times to swallow 3 eggs or chazu. Hachamer Kedil Gaima. Here it says to swallow. L'davar Rabbi Kiva Kaimer. The Kaimer Misharin Bitslia Gamia. That he's the one who says it's totally on roasting and swallowing. A mashir gemil chuda. Maybe the swallowing is one measurement. Kedei ligmoa shalosh beitzim zor chazu. That would be enough if you would be just swallowing if it was 3 eggs. Danut slio gemia, which is the same thing as roasting and swallowing. So swallowing 3 eggs is equivalent to roasting and swallowing. Rabbi Lezer ben Yirmiyahu Emer Kedei Shikshir Gardi Nima. So he said that the shear of hara is the amount of time it takes for a weaver to tie a thread. So boy Ravashi, what does that mean? The barachik o the makarev teku. So the question is, what exactly does that mean? Is it far or is it close? Says Rashi, Shnei Rashi Hanima, the 2 tips of the thread, Hanifsakais, that are broken apart from each other, are they far apart? So there's like a longer delay, or are they very close to one another, therefore it's much easier to do. So again, it's not so clear exactly to the second how long this is, but obviously a very short period of time. to take out like a splinter or something out of her mouth. Boy Ravashi, the mahadak o the lo mahadak teku. So if there's something stuck between her teeth, as Rashi said, is it tightly stuck in the teeth, therefore it takes more time to take out, or it's not? So again, teku, it's a boy the lifshita. Plemo aimer kadesha taishit yada watsal little kicker. The amount of times she will stick her hand into a basket to take out a loaf of bread. So boy Ravashi, the mahadak o the mahadak. So again, is the bread stuck in the basket really tight, therefore it's harder to yank out, or is it easy? B'charata o be'atika, is it a new or an old basket? Says Rashi, sal yashan chalaku. If it's an old basket, it's more smooth. V'noich lehishtamish min hachadash, hachadash yoytzel lataycha rashi kisamim shel ariga. Because it was woven, so therefore, because it's new, it's the inside is still has some threads and things that are jagged, which could maybe stick into the bread. So if it's a new basket, it's harder to get it out. If it's older, it's already smooth from the inside, so it's much easier to come out. B'chamima o b'krira, is it a hot bread or a cold bread? Says Rashi, lechem cham nimuch, that if it's warm, it's softer. V'nishmat min hayad, it slips from the hand. V'sarach loitziu b'nachas v'shoya b'hoitzasa. You have to take it out slower, and then v'shoya b'hoitzasa. It'll take more time taking it out. So it's interesting. It's soft, and therefore it's slippery. I would say even alternatively that because it's so hot, it's harder to pick up. Maybe it's harder to pick up, which maybe you could say pumfaker. If it's so hot, you pull it out quickly so you don't burn your hand. Okay. So anyway, that's how Rashi explains it. But nonetheless, that is the kasha that the Gemara continues to ask regarding to the opinion of Playmoy. As we continue to Dalet and Beis. Furthermore, we can ask about this bread. B'dechite o b'desari. Is it a wheat bread or is it a barley bread? What's the difference? So Rashi says, Shalchitin chaluk. Wheat is smoother. V'nishmat yoyser mishal tsarim. Again, it's because of that. There's a different difficulty because of its smoothness to be able to lift it up, so it could slip out of your hands. Bir kicha u bakusha is like soft. Is it hard? Teku. So Rav Yitzchak bar Rabbi Yosef bar Rav Yochanan kol echad ve'echad ba'atzmo shir. Each person came up. All these tanoim that we quoted are all saying their own time. Why? Because Rashi explains this is the amount of time it took for them to engage in Tchilas Bia. So therefore, they all had different shiurim. It doesn't mean that one is correct and one is wrong, but it was for them personally, this is what the time frame was. The problem with that statement is Ben Azai. We know that Ben Azai never got married, as Rashi quotes the Gemara in Yavamus. What am I supposed to do? I love the Torah so much. The world could survive through other people. That was the approach of Ben Azai. He said, I have such a close connection to Torah, I'm not shaykh to be able to get married. That in itself, of course, is hard to understand, but again, he was on such a high level. One of the four people who entered Pardes, very high level that he was on. But the kasha still stands. Why would he give a measurement? And we're saying all these shiur are based on their own life experiences, but he never was married to be able to have experience. He never had tashmish. So the answer is not necessarily. Maybe he was married, but then he got divorced. Maybe his teacher, his Rabbi, taught him this particular shir. So he's quoting his Rabbi. Those who have fear of a Kadosh Baruch Hu, so they have a certain element of siyata d'shmaya, and they're able to have this understanding of what the din is, what the halacha is, even if he didn't experience it himself. Which is question 10. Ketzad shir ben azai shir tuma v'hu lo nitzab. So kosev lifchais beis mitayich gimel tirutzim. So again, either he was married, got divorced, he learned it from his teacher, or again, Seid Hashem Li'Riyah. Darish Rav Avira, Zimnan Armel Mishmei Rav Ami. Sometimes he says the name of Rav Ami, Zimnan Armel Mishmei Rav Asi. Kol Oichel Lechem Below Netilos Yadayim. Any person who eats bread and he doesn't wash his hands, ki'ilu bal isha zayna. It's akin to a person who actually is having tashmish with a woman who is a zayna. Shenemar ki ba'ad isha zayna ad kikar lechem. So as we mentioned before, the connection between bread and a zayna. So if you don't treat bread properly by washing your hands first, it has an element of like zdus. Amarava hai ba'ad isha zayna ad kikar lechem, ba'ad kikar lechem ad isha zayna meboile. It should be the other way around. It should be due to not washing for bread is why he was mazana. The way the pasuk says, it almost sounds like because he was mazana, then he would not eat bread. But it should be due to not washing for bread is how he's mazana. A person who has relations with a zayna, eventually he's going to be begging for bread. Now, what is the shot? So this has to do with a form of addictive behavior. And if a person is constantly needing that dopamine rush of being with a zayna, and a zayna is not cheap, it could be very expensive. And if you have this addiction, like all other types of addictions, like drugs and the like, it can make you poor because you're constantly trying to feed this addiction to try to get to that next high, that next dopamine hit. And therefore, because of that, you're going to end up having nothing. Therefore, you'll need to be begging for bread because you're not going to have money for anything else. Anyone who shows a lack of respect for washing their hands, they'll be uprooted from the world. When a person washes Maim Rishayim, you're supposed to put your hands up like this when you wash your hands. When you do Maim Achrayim, you put your hands down. So Maim Rishayim, you see people say, they're putting their hands up, but when they do Maim Achrayim, the hands are put down. So Tanya Mihachi, when a person washes his hands, put your hands up. Because if you don't, maybe the water will come down below the wrist. And then again it'll be matami yardayim. So we do this in order to avoid the potential of toma. However, the other way around, okay, let's stop there 1 second. Look in Rashi. So it says that some people do it 3 times, but Rashi clearly says you wash your hands 2 on your right, 2 on your left. That'll be matar your hands. So now your hands are clean. So that's the so this is it. You have to wash your hands twice. The first time is matar your hands. So because the water that's on your hands is wet, so it became like impure in regard, therefore you have to wash off that water. That's why you do it a second time. That your hands become tummy until the wrist. Your hands can become a sheni. So the idea is by putting your hands up here, so that the water, even if it's dripping down here, it doesn't matter, because the water which is on your hands, even if it's not going to be poiselos yadayim, the fact that your hands are wet, once it goes down. So we pull up this so it can drip below the wrist, because the whole notion of the Chachamim being poiselos yadayim or shnias, this secondary level of tum, is only up to the wrist. So therefore, if you go like this, the water that drips down, it's not going to be a problem. So that's the reason why you have to do it that way. And that's why Rashi concludes and says, Hilchas sar shiagbia Rashi etzboisas lomala shemi yetzu maim harishan v'yasa b'yitmas yadayim. Because if you do it like this, so then the hands and you have water, it can drip down, and then again, it could be matami yadayim again. So by going like this, you're basically getting the water to drip off this way. Okay. All right. So that is there. However, when it comes to Mayim Acharayim, you do the opposite. And it says, in Rashi, Kedei Shetered Hazu Hamashil Tavshil Shibiyadav Shahari Lahaver Hazu Hamahin. The removal of the filth that's on your hand, so you go like this, so it just drips down off. Okay. TA 14. TA 14 says, Madua Mayim Rishenim Shiagbia Yad L'Mal, Madua Mayim Shiashbil L'Mata. So again, Mayim Rishenim Yagbia Shemayetzu Chutz L'Perek. Maybe it'll go outside of the wrist. V'yachziru, and it'll come back via Tamas Yadayim. So the problem is, if the water comes here and then it goes back, so then that water will again be Matam Yadayim. So therefore we want you to go like this, so that it'll go down and will not come back up. As opposed to Mayim Acharayim, as we said, let's see how he writes it. Mayim Acharayim yashbu kadei shetered zuhama shel tavshil. So that filth, if you will, should be removed. TB 15, which may be the exact same question. Mamish the same question. TB 15. So let me just put this here. TB 15. Same question. Okay. All right. Okay. Before we go weiter, let's see if there's another question that we haven't done. Let's look at question 10. Question 10. Ketzad Shir ben Azai, so we did that one. Question 11. My mais begemar mikra de mishli kibad isha zayna ad kikar lechem Indian Sotah. So one has to do with the Shir Tuma, according to Plimo, is Kadesh Taishid Yadal Itzal Little Kikar, the amount of time a woman takes bread out of a basket, or Kol Habal Isha Zayna L'Sem Avakash Kikar Lechem. And a person who ends up having Tashush with a Zayna is going to end up even begging for bread. Back in the Gemara, Rabbi Avo, Kol Anoitel Pas Beloy Niguv Yadayim Ki'u Oichel Lechem Tameh. Anyone who eats bread without drying their hands first, it's Ki'ilu like they actually are eating impure bread. Shnemar, as the pasuk says in Yechezkel, V'yamar Hashem Kacha Yochel B'nei Yisrael Es Lachman Tameh B'goymer, that they eat this impure bread. Umay V'eshes Ish Nefesh Shikara Totzud, that this married woman who is Nefesh Shikara, who is a precious soul, Totzud is going to be captured. So we see this connection that a person who again eats, as Rashi says, davar mois, who v'chashiv ketuma, it has the same element of tuma. So then it says, "My v'eshes ish." What does this end of the pasuk mean? Sefer Dikra, that any person, v'eshes ish nefesh shikara totzud, is to be trapped. So what does this pasuk mean? So the Gemara answers like this: if you think you're such an important person, you have gaiva, you'll end up stumbling with eshes ish, committing adultery. And Rashi says eshes ish zayna is nefesh hayikara hagavayahi. She thinks she's very lofty, or maybe the guy does. Titsudena, you will be entrapped. Right, if you'll pursue her. The sad aisu magvia. So that's the idea. That again, if a person who has this great level of self-confidence, and I'd like to translate gasas ruach here as narcissism. A person who commits adultery, they basically are so wrapped up in their own life and their own pleasures, they don't think about anyone else except for themselves. And therefore it makes sense. If you have this gasas ruach, if you're so narcissistic, you're going to be likely also be nechshav eshes ish. Shnemar v'eshes ish nefesh shikara totzud. Rabbi, high nefesh shikara, nefesh gavoya miboyle. Why say a precious woman should say nefesh gavoya if it's talking about gaiva? Vod, he totzud miboyle. It says that it should say that he captures her. El Umar Rabbi Kol Habal Eishasi Shafilu Lama Torah. Anyone who's boil and Eishasish, even someone who learns Torah, it's written about him, Yikarihi Mipeninim, that he is precious as pearls, Mikoin Gadol Shenichnas Lefnai Lefnim, is from a Kohen Gadol who enters into the Kodesh Kodashim, he titzudenu ladina shel Gehenim. He will be judged in Gehenim. So it doesn't make any difference who this person is. Nonetheless, he's still going to be held accountable. Says Rashi Kohen Gadol, the Afil Mamzer Talmud Chacham, Kodem Kohen Am Aretz. With Toach Rishon, Avarach Rishon, Mahai Kra, Yalfinam Bihariyos. So this pasuk teaches us this din that even a Mamzer Talmud Chacham is greater than an Am Haaretz who happens to be a Kohen Gadol. So the Gemara then says as follows: He titzudena. So he said in the name of the Rashbi, Kol Adam Sheish Bo Gasas Ruach, anyone who again is so wrapped up in their own self, that in itself is like idol worship. Like you are engaged in your own self-worship. Therefore, that's what it means. It's an abomination anyone who is haughty. Do not bring a toeva into your house. So what toeva are you bringing into your house? It's yourself. So it's possible that you yourself are a toeva. The fact that you have this narcissistic behavior, and therefore because of that, you're not shaykh to serve Hashem, because you're so busy serving yourself. Rabbi Yochanan did really Omer Ki'u Kafar Be'ikr. And therefore, such a person is like Kafar Be'ikr, like they deny the fundamental of Hashem. You forget Hashem. Rav Chamba Bar Chanina Omer Ki'u Bana Al Kol Rayis. It's like you attach with all the different Arayis. Ksiv Hacha Tuavas Hashem Kol Gabil Lev. Ksiv Hasam, and in Vayikr it says Kias Kol HaTuavas Oev Gaimer. Ulu Omer Ki'u Bana Bama. It's like you built a Bama for idol worship, obviously, which is not allowed. Shnemer chidu lachem min adam asher neshama ba'apo ki bameh nechshavu atikri bameh elabama my yada liyad lo yinakeh. So this is brought down many places. What does it mean? Hand to hand, you'll not be clean. Amarav kol habal eshas ish, and who has relations with a married woman, feel hik nahu hakadosh baruch hu, even if he praises Hashem, that Hashem has like acquired his greatness. L'kadosh baruch Hu Shemayim ba'aretz ka'Avraham Avinu d'chsib be'harimaisi yadi Hashem kel elyon kadosh Shemayim ba'aretz li'yanakim b'ginash gehenim. It's not going to matter who you are. If you're an oiv, if you had eshes ish, you're going to be held accountable for that. So kashul l'daber Reb Shiloi hayad liyad li'yanakeh yadi miboyle. I should say yadi. Ella Amid Rav Shila feel Kibul Tarik Moshe Rabbeinu. This is the famous pasuk drasha that even if you have Tarik like Moshe Rabbeinu, which you don't, but imagine if you did, Ksibbe Miyamino Date Eish Das Lamoy Lo Yinakem Medina Shagahenam. You still are not going to be spared, even if you're as great as Moshe Rabbeinu, which you are not close. So certainly one's fate is Gehenim. Kashalei Rabbi Yochanan. Hayad liyad, yad miyad miboyle. Elam Rabbi Yochanan, as the Gemara then continues, as we'll conclude, afilu, as we continue on Hey Amud Aleph, afilu oisa sadaka b'seiser. Even if you do charity in private, which is the greatest thing you can do, matan b'seiser, except matan b'seiser, yichbe off, that will cause the anger will be removed. Gaimer. Medina shall Gehenom. Question 12. Hashleim es hamemra. Complete this statement. Kol adam sheish bo gasas ruach ki'ilu. There's 4 answers. He only asks you to do 2 of them. Either ki'ilu oivdu es kachavim, ki'ilu koifer be'ikr, bo al kol rayas, or bana bama. Adkan.